Hi, Mo.
Oh, is it Brad?
Yeah, how are you?
Fine. It's a delight to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you again. If you remember, we had you on the program last June, is when we did the first program.
No, it's right close to my birthday. I remember that.
And the response, Mo, has been incredible. The kids like to hear from you and like to hear about what you're doing.
Well, I've given them right along because in the last 10 days I've received about 200 letters from around Revere and North Revere, Mass.
Oh, so that's what the kids in Revere are doing. But
It's got me crazy here with these, you have to send them all pictures, you know. It comes from all directions, you see. It comes from the studio, it comes from my mailbox, and it comes from many sources, you know.
Well, it's good to have you back on the air again. And when I talk to all of the kids who hear the first program we've done, we've reran it several times, they all want to hear the story of the Three Stooges and how you got together and how the whole thing came about. Can you give it to us?
Well, I guess it was like a nightmare in Technicolor, I guess. Anyhow, originally I and my older brother Shep worked alone in Vaudeville and then dramatic stop and all that sort of thing, you see. And then after we got together, we joined a fellow called Ted Healy, a boyhood friend of ours. And we went along with Shep and I and Ted in vaudeville for a while, and then in 1925, we picked up Larry Fine. And he was working in a nightclub in Chicago. Became Champagne and Larry in 1925. And then we went along with Ted until 1932. Then Shemp got the opportunity to play the character Nobby in the Joe Palooka pictures. So he came onto the coast. At that point, we brought in my younger brother Curly. And that was the original Curly. He was working with a fellow called Orville Martin Band, the comedy press conductor. So he gave him 2 weeks' notice and came and joined with us in 1932. In 1946, Curly had a stroke in the middle of a picture. And he couldn't continue, so Shemp came back. 1952, Curly passed away, and in 1955, Shemp passed away. So we replaced Shemp with a fellow called Joe Busser, who still works on some shows on the air occasionally as a big player.
There's some commercials now, too.
Yes, that's right.
Mo, when were the original films of the Three Stooges made? Around what year?
Are you speaking of the Three Stooges film?
Right, the original Three Stooges film.
That was 1934. We signed the longest contract that any performers ever signed with a studio. 24 straight years with no option. They worked with Columbia and made the comedies from 1934 to 1958. And in 58, we began to make features on a co-production deal, we and Columbia, which had Have Rocket Will Travel, Three Stooges Meet Hercules, and we did for Fox, we did a picture called Snow White and the Three Stooges, and came back to Columbia and did the Three Stooges in Orbit, Outlaws in the Days, The Outlaws is Coming, and we made several independent pictures for other people.
Mo, what is it you think about the Three Stooges that has consistently pulled such a following from kids over the years, continuously?
Well, I tell you, it's human nature, whether it's a kid, a man, or a grandfather, whatever it is, our formula is the upsetting of dignity. If you take a man in a high hat and a monocle with spats and you hit him in the face with a pie, everybody loves it. But don't try to hit an old man or an old woman or a little boy with a pie because they'll take it for it. So our formula has been the upsetting of dignity.
Any sort of flack or complaints from parents of kids who watch the show?
There was an isolated area in Cleveland, a station in Cleveland, where the parent teachers, I don't know who they were, the parent teachers, they're the ones that can't open their mouths at home, so they shoot their mouths off someplace else. So they took it up, and Cleveland took them off the air, and then they contacted this child psychologist, I forget who her name was, and they asked her, that is the station management, asked her would there be any harm in a youngster seeing the Three Stooges perform? And she said, I should say not, because I watched the Three Stooges myself when I was quite young. And there's nothing can brush off on the kids, and if it does, that particular child is a problem child, and if he saw the Stooges or not, he'd still be a problem child.
Now, does that include pulling out of hair, poking people in the eye with your fingers?
Yeah, well, of course, most of them know that the minute I poke at the eyes, I never touch their eyes. The minute I poke at the eyes, and they say something, hey, watch what you're doing, you know, they still, nobody ever got unconscious or bled or got shot. No pistols, no firing, no dragging, things like that. You get hit on the head with a board and you say, hey, watch what you're doing, you know. That was the extent of it. But you see the parent teachers or whoever they are, they think nothing, you know, when they're playing cards, bridge, or gin rummy and everything, and the little fella comes in and says, Ma, and she said, please, don't bother me now. You go in and turn on TV. So, well, it's unguided. The kid turns on what he likes to see. So what does he see? A Western, a blood and thunder Western where everybody gets shot and dragged around, tied to the tail of a horse and all that kind of stuff? How can you compare that kind of violence and killing with the Three Stooges who never did any of that kind of stuff? Anything they did was amongst themselves.
No slips at all on your part? You never missed?
Never missed.
Is it luck or just knowing what you're doing?
It's accuracy. You know, every pie that was thrown at folks in our pictures was thrown by me, except the ones that I got. Because the studio said at one time that I had saved them thousands of dollars in time. And time in making a motion picture is money. Because if I was to throw a pie and hit a woman in the hair, instead of the face, it would take an hour and a half before she got washed up and washed her hair, shampooed, and stood in front of the dryer and everything else. Or if you hit their clothes, they'd have to take off the clothes, clean them up and everything. I never missed.
Wow, I can't do that.
even when I take, you know, when I throw a breakaway vase or a flower pot or anything else, right on the button. I don't need 2 tries.
Hey, Mo, if you want to teach somebody how to throw a pie, what's the directions?
Well, first of all, the pie has to be made of the ingredients that we make it.
Okay.
There's the proper weight to it.
Is it like whipped cream?
Well, the basic topping is whipped cream, but the ingredients are liquid chocolate, ground pumpkin, and what else? A little flour, you know, because when you throw the pie, without that, it could hit somebody in the face and fall off. But this way, we throw them the kind we make, it hits the face and sticks there. So I say that the accuracy in throwing is just, look, when I was 10 years old, I could throw a snowball and hit a tin can 50 feet away. So I say, and hit somebody on the hat, too.
So your experience, how many pies can you estimate that you have thrown in your career as being one of the Three Stooges?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you there was one picture called Slippery Stilts, in which we threw 162 pies, and it wasn't enough. So the property man had some shells, you know, pie shells, and he shoveled up all that stuff from the floor and made new pie, with splinters and nails and everything else.
Did you ever run into any accidents on the set as a result of some of your slapstick tricks?
Well, it wasn't on account of slapstick tricks. You know, when I was standing on the table measuring for carpenter work, and Curly came along with a circular saw and cut the board that he measured right through the board and through the table. And when I took one step, the table collapsed and I went down. So I broke 2 ribs. And we had teeth knocked out. We got stitches in the head. Well, those things happen, but they're not planned to happen. They just happen. We never used any doubles for ourselves until just one picture, which we made called Three Little Pigskins, where Curly was running for a touchdown with us doing the blocking. Those days you called it interference. And we got to a certain point, and on the sidelines, a cameraman and newsman hollered, hold it, we want to take a picture. So Curly would stop and pose. In the meantime, the two teams would bury him right into the ground, and the teams we were using were the varsity team of Loyola University out here. Well, they don't know anything about falling on actors without hurting them. They just plow into you. So we said to the director, he said, we're not going to do this. You better get some doubles because that looks a little too dangerous using a team from Loyola.
You know, I recall hearing about an incident where Larry got hit in the head with a pen in the forehead.
Yes,
Can you tell us about that?
Well, that was where we, in one comedy, we invented a fountain pen that wrote under whipped cream. And then we put it in the machine to show some investors. And Curly's sleeve got caught in the switch and started to go very fast. The pen flew out, and it was rigged. You see, the fountain pen had little screw eyes in the bottom with a wire going through, which they opaqued. You could never see it. And the property man had this around Larry's head, right in the middle of his forehead. There was a little metal disc with a hole in the center. And that hole was filled with putty and made up just like his skin, so that the fountain pen was to be thrown and go into that little hole and stick in the putty. Well, when the shot went on, he threw the pen along this trolley and threw it a little too hard. So it went through the putty and right into Larry's head.
I guess it wasn't too funny then.
No. But Larry kept on talking, spoke his lines. Well, fortunately, there was no blood or any kind until after, when he pulled the pen out, when the scene was over. Pulled out.
Good show business.
Ink mixed with blood.
That takes good show business fortitude, I think.
Oh, sure. I mean, look, the accidents that we were in making a picture weren't looked for. You know, they happen. They just happen to happen, that's all.
And the show must go on.
Oh, definitely.
You know, Mo, today the kids really have nobody to follow and imitate, as did the kids when your films first came out. Do you think that they're sort of presented with a disadvantage because of that?
Well, look, first of all, I must explain to you that those comedies were made for theaters. And they played in theaters for a number of years. Then in 1948, I think it was, they released those comedies to TV. Now, in the theaters, you wouldn't see 4- and 5-year-old kids in the theater watching a motion picture. But when they came into their home on TV, they had something to watch. So they accepted us as clowns, silly, funny. And from the fan mail that I get, these people are writing to me now who watched us when they were 5 years old. They are now seniors in college. And I still get the fan mail from them. And they still watch us.
Well, you're more or less of a hero.
Well, I don't know, but it's just one of those things. Now, look, the greatest of them all, Chaplin. Another great, Buster Keaton. Another great, Harry Langdon. Another great, Larry Seaman. You take all these terrific, great comedians who are gone, you see. So who are they going to watch? I mean, you're not going to give them a lesson in psychology on TV. And they're a little too old for Sesame Street, which I think is one of the greatest programs on TV for the youth, for the little ones. So I say that they have gotten a hold of us, and they've made heroes of us.
I guess there's a difference between a person who is a comic and a person who is a comedian.
Oh, there's quite a difference.
What do you consider the difference, and what do you consider yourself to be?
I'll explain this to you. You see, a comedian is one, well, I can only tell you, like, take Johnny Carson, Bob Hope, all these fellas in which have terrific personalities, but their material is written for them, and they know how to deliver it, you see. But a comic can take a situation, an unfunny situation, and make it funny. And we are comics. We are not stand-up comedians, you see. You know, like Dick Cavett and all those boys, they're very clever. They have very fine personalities, which is the basic element in what they're doing. They have that certain personality that can bring out from others what the audience wants to know. There are some I can't stand, but I'm not going to mention those.
Why not? No, don't mention those. What do you think about television today as a person who, as a performer, grew into it as it was growing?
Well, I think television is a great medium. I think that the commercial part of it is taking advantage of a lot of the situations. You take Channel 28 out here, no commercials whatsoever.
That's public television?
Television. And it's really great. They have some wonderful shows on it. And we're going to have pay TV soon. We had it once. They sampled it in my home here. You had a right to look at one picture for 5 minutes, and if you liked it, you put $50 in the slot, and you looked at it. If you didn't like it after the first 5 minutes, you didn't do anything about it. So it's coming back. There's no question about it. What right do they have to have closed circuits for the prize fights and all those kind of things that charge them $10 and $12.50 to see this World Championship bout? They have thousands of seats being sold here at $10.50 and $12.50.
You think maybe it should be televised for everyone to see?
That's correct. Pay TV, pay it, but not $10.50 and $12.50. Put $1 in the machine and see it. And if they did that, they'd have 3 times as much of an audience as they do in those closed circuit things. They have no right to have closed circuit.
Well, it's true that if a performer is on Broadway for 5 years playing the standing room only every night, more people will see him in 1 half-hour television program than in 5 years.
That's correct.
How do you feel about the film medium as compared to television? Your films were adapted from theater to television. Did that make much of a difference?
Our type of work is adaptable in any of those situations. There are some that just doesn't work out that way, you know. But usually the networks pick up the things that are most successful out of the theater. And they take and buy in big lots the old films. Like you can go see out here, you can see Cagney films till the cows come home. These networks buy these films from the studios, which is a mistake. I mean, if they wanted to do that, they should not sell it to the networks. Let the networks make their own films for TV so that more actors could work.
Do you watch any of your old films at all?
If I do, occasionally it's from a technical standpoint. I look at it and see where we could have done better, where we made a mistake, you know, things like that.
You'd never watch it from the entertainment point of view?
Yes, certain ones I do, like in a couple of pictures of the part of Hitler and Slippery Silks, that pie-throwing thing. I laugh every time I see it.
There were certain movements that the Stooges did that were characteristic to them, like Curly's slapping of the hands or the patting in the head. How did that ever
well, I'll tell you.
Come about?
You see, Curly was what we call a hard study. He just couldn't adapt himself to studying lines, you know. So he'd study them, but then they'd leave his mind for a while. Every time he got stuck for a speech, he'd go into action. He'd fall on the floor and spin around like a top until he remembered what he had to say. Or he'd do a back kick, a dance-like, until he remembered. Or he'd bark at me and clap his hands. He did everything. We never knew what he was going to do.
And that's how
those... Very, very creative. Very creative.
And that's how those came about.
Yeah, yeah. They were never planned or anything. It was just he was taking advantage of action to give him time to remember what he had to say.
Now, of the original Stooges, who was still around?
I'm still around.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm talking to you, so...
my partner Larry, you know, the one who looks like a porcupine?
Right.
Well, he had a stroke in 1971, and he is now at the Motion Picture Country House out here in Calabasas, California.
Mm-hmm.
He is mentally very alert, but he's paralyzed on one side.
Do you ever get together and talk about the old films?
Oh, sure. I talk to him on the phone fairly often. I go out to visit him quite often. We tell each other jokes.
Moe,
Usually Nixon jokes.
Oh, really? Is that a political comment, Mr. Moe Howard?
No, it's just a personal comment.
Oh, okay. That we said, the producer says that's okay.
No, politics don't bother me too much, except when I have to open a gate and go into the water. That's something else.
Oh, poor Watergate joke, yeah. Well,
I have no Watergate joke. That's not a joke, to tell you the truth. It's a very, very some situation, and somewhere along the line, somebody's going to suffer. And I believe it's the Republican Party. It's a shame that a few people can create a situation that destroys others who are not to blame.
We've only got a couple of minutes left here. When was the last film made, Moe?
Don't say the last. Say the most recent.
All right, wait a minute.
Don't never say the last film.
Let me do this again, okay? We'll try to. Tell me, Moe, when was the most recent Three Stooges film made? Was that good?
Yes.
Thank you.
In 1971, we did a film which we financed ourselves, God help us, called Kook's Tour, K-O-O-K-S. It has never been released. We're just re-editing it, and I think we'll be able to put it out pretty soon.
As recent as 1971?
Yes, sir.
Now, Larry was in that, and you...
Right after that, he had the stroke.
Oh, now, who was the third Stooge in that?
Joe DeRita. We called him Curly Joe. He was with us from 1958 to 1971.
Wow, that's really something. A new Three Stooges film. To be coming soon, huh?
I would say so.
Well, that's great. Hey, listen, Moe, I'm at the end of a program. Moe, thanks for coming on the air.
I want to tell you, Boston has been a very favorite spot of mine. From the RKO Boston Theater, I used to travel down to Filene's and buy things for my wife. And around the corner from the theater was a delicatessen store, which I love to eat, and everything else.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure talking to you, Brad.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.